And mics are unmuted, still not live yet. About 30 seconds. And we're live.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Microphone check. Roll call of PC members.
Stratton.
Here.
Merchant.
Here.
Pelton and here. Trumbull.
Here.
Sherman.
Here.
Rebant.
Here.
Milnick.
Here.
Okay, somehow I left off approval of the agenda as the next item, so we need to make that amendment. We'll be adding approval of the agenda to the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or amendments?
No.
I have a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of approval of agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve it with the changes.
Second. Merchant.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Declaration of conflict of interest pertinent to agenda items.
None for Pelton and.
No. 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 No.
Okay. Public comment. In-house, any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the PC. Public comments shall be carried out in accordance with the following rules and procedures. There are 2 opportunities for public comment, now and at the end of the meeting. Comments shall be directed to the PC with questions directed to the chair. Any person wishing to address the PC shall speak from the lectern and state his or her name and address. Persons may address the PC on matters that are relevant to township planning and zoning issues. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding the time needed to answer a PC member's questions. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. In order to avoid unscheduled debates, the PC generally will not comment or respond to public comment. Silence or non-response from the PC should not be interpreted as disinterest. Would anybody like to make a public comment right now? I can't see everyone.
We can't see you either.
Yeah,
I will make a public comment.
thanks, Mike.
Mike Jacobson, Whitewater Township resident. This is a pretty good idea. I think the placement's wrong. Might be better if it was put over there a little bit so you could see the audience and the audience can see you.
We did try that. The problem is if anybody sits there, they block it.
No, over by that.
By where the coat rack was. Yeah, no, we did try that, but thanks.
I mean, if it's here. It's not in anybody's way, and the people on that side of the room can see the TV, and the people on this side of the room can see that TV.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, then I'd like to welcome Kelly Sullivan. He's the CEO of Epic MRA, which is the consultant that the township hired to run our short-term rental survey. Thanks for being here, Kelly.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Again, Kelly Sullivan with Epic MRA. This is my 32nd year with the firm. And I just recently took over as co-owner, and I'm happy to present the survey of the township results. It was a bit of a robust survey, as you may recall. So I'll try to get through these slides as quickly as possible and then answer any questions that you may have.
Just a second. Does anybody want to move so you can see? Are you able to see?
I think I'll be all right.
I can add a chair over here.
Make more room here or slide down.
Yeah.
I can see now.
Thank you. Not typically. No guarantees I won't mess it up again, but I appreciate your help. Okay, as you might recall, the first order of business, we went live with a live operator telephone survey first. We interviewed 100 residents of the township, with 78% of those interviews conducted via cell phone. This first initial survey was intended as a control group so that we accurately represent the different ages and other demographic characteristics of the township before going to the wider audience survey that went live immediately upon calling of the live operator telephone survey. For the online survey, questions were identical to those that we asked in the live operator telephone interview. We invited residents to participate by sending postcards out to each household with a unique ID number attached to each one, with the instruction that each resident in the household could use that unique ID number to participate in the survey one time per individual. How we came about doing that is with information provided from the township, as well as our own information. We maintain databases internally. They're regularly updated with census information, the qualified voter file from the state, et cetera, et cetera. That's how we were able to assign those unique codes for each individual household. When all was said and done, we looked at the two data sets and made sure that there were no duplicate responses or false starts. So when all was said and done, we ended up with a total of 563 unique responses for the survey, which carries a margin of error of 4 points. What that means is, using 50% as an example, it's very likely 95 out of 100 times, if we were to repeat the same survey over and over and over again, those percentages would fall within the margin of error for each response gathered throughout the survey. There were several question sets presented in the survey and a battery of questions where we would ask the respondents to, here is how you can respond to these, and then there were several different line items. When we get to questions like that, you won't see it in the presentation, but I wanted to let you know our protocol is to, especially in the live operator telephone interview, we rotate the order in which they hear those questions within each set. The reason for doing that is to eliminate any potential presentation bias. That is, if we always lead with the same thing first, could that possibly skew the results? So that's why we rotate those sets of questions. That said, every single respondent, whether it was via phone, online, or some of the written surveys that we did receive back via mail, had the opportunity to answer every single question. Whether or not they were rotated in the order of presentation notwithstanding, every question was asked of every single respondent. So first up, we asked about the respondent's residency. Nearly 80% of those that took the survey were full-time residents, 21% part-time. We asked about property ownership, and you can see nearly unanimously all survey respondents do own property in the township, with only 2% saying they did not and 1% refusing to answer the question. We asked about property size. About a third said they own less than 1 acre. Almost another third said between 1 and 3. 9% said 3 to 5. And again, almost another even slice of the pie at 27% owning more than 5 acres. Majority of the respondents were registered to vote in the township. 75% affirmed that they were. 20% said they did not or were not registered to vote, with another 5% declining to answer that question. Next up, respondents were informed that short-term rentals, generally defined as privately owned residences, properties, et cetera, such as those listed on Airbnb and VRBO, for guests' use less than 30 days, and asked, based on their understanding, if Whitewater Township currently allows short-term rentals. Nearly a quarter of all the respondents said that they are currently allowed in the township. That's what they believe. Almost 60% said they're not allowed, and almost 20% simply did not know. We asked about personal use of short-term rentals. Had the respondents ever used a short-term rental in the past? Not in the township, but just ever anywhere. And 2/3 of the respondents had used short-term rentals in the past. We asked them about their personal experience using short-term rentals, and you can see it was overwhelmingly positive. Nearly 80% offered a positive rating overall. 64% said they had a very positive experience, with only 7% saying they had a negative experience in their own personal use of short-term rentals in the past. We also asked survey participants if they have ever lived near or next to a short-term rental. Again, not necessarily in the township, but ever throughout their life. And about 60% said they had, 40% said they did not. We then asked about their personal experience neighboring a short-term rental, and you can see a drastic difference in opinion from using a short-term rental versus living next door or nearby a short-term rental. Almost evenly split. 46% offered a positive rating of having that experience living next to or nearby a short-term rental, and 46% had a negative opinion based on their past experiences. Overall, the intensity of being very positive was a little higher at 40% than being very negative at just under 30%. From there, we asked, after informing the respondents that short-term rentals are not currently allowed in Whitewater Township, to best describe their position or their opinion about short-term rentals in the township. 19% of the respondents said they should be allowed with no restrictions. 42% said they should be allowed, but with certain restrictions imposed upon them. And 38% said they should not be allowed under any circumstances. We call this the first asking of the question because at the end of the survey, after respondents have had a chance to think more about short-term rentals, weigh some of the potential benefits and some of the potential drawbacks, we asked this question again to see if their mind had changed whatsoever. Spoiler alert, it changed very little, but I'll get to that slide near the end. So next up, we presented them with a list of some concerns about allowing short-term rentals that some residents may have mentioned, and asked for each one, do you feel if that's a very serious concern, somewhat serious, only minor, or really no concern at all when it comes to allowing short-term rentals in the township? So ranked from most to least total concern, the number one was concern about responsible management and accountability of the property. 2/3 said that was a concern overall. Nearly half said that's a very serious concern. Followed by enforcement of existing and or new ordinances. Very similar responses. 6 and 10 said it was a concern. Just over 4 and 10 said it was a very serious concern. Followed by impact on the neighborhood or cohesion of the community. Almost 6 and 10 said that's a concern overall. 4 and 10 said it's a very serious concern. Impact on housing availability in the housing market, at half said it was a total concern, and nearly a third said it's a very serious concern. Followed by overcrowding of parking into the home. Just under half said it was a concern overall, and just under 3 and 10 said it would be a very serious concern. And then we asked if the respondents had any of those same concerns with their current neighbors. And the top 3 mentioned in the previous slide were the top 3 mentioned by respondents when it comes to concerns that they have with their neighbors. 14% said enforcement of existing or new ordinances. 14% said impact on the neighborhood or cohesion of the community, and 14% said responsible management and accountability of the property. So these concerns that residents have with their current neighbors are almost identical in presentation and order of the concerns they have should short-term rentals be allowed in the township. So as not to be one-sided, we then offered a list of some of the potential benefits of allowing short-term rentals in the township. And for each, very similar respondents were asked to indicate if it's a major benefit, somewhat only minor, or no benefit at all if it came to allowing short-term rentals in the township. And once again, ranked from most to least total benefit. Number 1, protecting the property rights of property owners. Nearly 6 and 10 found that to be a total benefit, 4 and 10, a major benefit. And again, these questions were asked of all respondents, regardless of how they said they felt on the initial asking of should we or should we not allow short-term rentals in the township. Supporting local businesses was number 2, nearly 6 and 10 total benefit, nearly 4 and 10 a major benefit. Supporting local property owners, 5 and 10 total benefit, and 35% a major benefit. Improving upkeep of township properties, 45% said that would be a benefit, 30% said major. Attracting businesses to the area, 43% total benefit, 28% major. And exposing Whitewater Township, last but not least, to new people, 4 and 10 said total benefit, and 23% said that would be a major benefit. At that point in the study, we asked respondents to think about different zoning districts, and they were described within Whitewater Township. We read them a list and asked if they would generally support or oppose allowing short-term rentals in each of those areas, zoning districts that we described, and then went on to ask them to clarify if you support or oppose, strongly support or just somewhat. So rank most to least, commercial areas, by and large, the most supported at 72%, 39% said they would support that strongly. Industrial areas, 6 and 10 total support, 3 and 10 strongly. Recreational areas, just over half total support, 35% strongly. Agricultural areas, again, just over 50%, 34% strongly. Residential areas on the shoreline and waterways, 50% total support, just under a third strongly. And other residential areas and subdivisions, last but not least, 48% total support and 30% strongly.
I just want to clarify. So the 48% is the total number of people that supported it, whether they strongly supported or didn't, or.
Right. So
Okay.
that
So
total support.
percent of the 48 strongly support residential areas.
Okay, so 48%, the total support, that is combined with those that said they would strongly and somewhat. And then I broke out those that were more high intensity, 30%. That's not 30% of the 48%. That's 30% of everybody that responded in the survey, the entire population. Thank you for pointing that out. I should have been more clear. From there, we got into a list of potential regulations and requirements that are often enforced on short-term rentals, and said, putting aside your personal feelings on allowing them in the township, to indicate if each regulation or requirement would be very important, somewhat important, only a little important, or not important at all. You're probably noticing a theme here that we tend to use 4-point scales. We try to stay away from 5-point scales because we don't want people to just easily select the middle of the road. Number one, limiting the number of people allowed in a short-term rental based on the number of bedrooms. 80% of all respondents said that was important. 64% said very. Regular building and fire inspections. 3/4 of the respondents said it's important. Over half said very. Established fines for non-compliance. Just over 70% found that important. Nearly 60% very. Registration with the township. Nearly 70% said that would be important, and just over half said very important. Maintaining a local property manager, 67% of the respondents felt that to be important. Just over half said very important. And fees to support code enforcement, nearly 2/3 of the respondents felt that would be important, and just under half said very important. Septic system inspections, nearly 2/3 said important overall, and just under half said very important. And limits on the number of days allowed to stay in the residence, 56% said that that would be important, 40% very important. We asked a question, should short-term rentals be allowed? Should there be a limit imposed on the maximum number of people allowed in that particular short-term rental? 7 in 10 respondents felt that there should be a limit on the number of people allowed overall. 21% said no, there should not, with the rest declining to answer. We asked specifically among those who supported limiting the number of people allowed in the short-term rental. So that would be 401 of the respondents out of the 563, based on the answer to the question, the prior question, what they thought the maximum occupancy limit should be per bedroom. And you can see a strong majority felt 2 people, followed by 9% saying 3 people, and 4% saying 2 adults and 1 small child, which could be combined with the 3 people. So you see you have 2/3 of the respondents that felt that there should be a limit on occupancy levels, saying it should be 2 people per bedroom as a limit by a majority, followed by about 9 to 13% saying 2.5 if you count the child as a half, or up to 3. Then we talked about short-term rentals associated costs. Explaining that in order to enforce rules and restrictions on short-term rentals, the township would have necessarily additional administrative costs associated with doing so and enforcing those regulations. And we asked, who should bear the cost of short-term rental regulations? Should that be those that are running the short-term rentals? Should that be everybody in the township? Or should that be a combination of both? And you can see 7 in 10 said that cost should be borne by those that are running and benefiting from having that short-term rental, with 8% saying it should be shared evenly among everybody in the township, and 10% saying a combination of both, and an equal amount, 10% saying they really weren't sure. We also asked if short-term rentals should be limited to individuals' primary residences, where they live or have a full-time residency. 45% said yes, 41% said no, and 14% were undecided. So a very mixed feeling on this particular issue among all survey respondents in the township. We did ask about potential outside investments, saying in some tourist areas, homes are purchased by outside corporations or investment entities for the sole purpose of creating short-term rentals. And some have voiced concerns about this practice, including a lack of actual residents with community ties and leading to potentially increased home prices. Respondents were asked to indicate their level of concern about these things, and you can see nearly 2/3 of the respondents felt that this was a concern. Just over 4 in 10 said this is a very serious concern, with only 24% saying, I'm not really concerned about that practice whatsoever. So that led us to our final ask on the topic. After thinking about some of the pros and cons about short-term rentals, what describes your feeling about allowing short-term rentals in Whitewater Township? 17% said they should be allowed with no restriction, very little variance from the first time we asked. 45% said they should be allowed with certain restrictions imposed upon them. And 35% said they should not be allowed in the township under any circumstances. Very little change in that number. I believe it was 38, went down to 35. So yeah, the majority shift in opinion throughout the course of the survey was only slightly towards allowing short-term rentals with certain restrictions in the township. Then in an open-ended question, we asked, okay, for those of you that said you are in favor of short-term rentals in Whitewater Township in any form, whether that's without restrictions or with certain restrictions, what's the main reason why? And this was an open-ended question. They were allowed to just kind of write whatever they wanted to say or tell our callers whatever they wanted to say verbatim. And then I grouped them into categories. The number one was protecting property rights of owners, followed by property owner revenue and generation of business revenue. And then 4% came in with a volunteered, well, there are not very many places to stay in the area. It would be an alternative to staying at a hotel. We asked that same group that said they were in favor of short-term rentals, again, in any form. Do you think there should be a limit on the total number of short-term rentals allowed in Whitewater Township? And a third said yes, there should be a cap on the number of short-term rentals allowed in the township if they are allowed, with 50% of those that said they would be in favor of short-term rentals being allowed in any form, saying that there should not be a limit on the number of short-term residences allowed in the township. We also asked that same group, do you think that there should be a minimum distance between one short-term rental and another to avoid concentration of such units in small areas? About a quarter said yes, there should be a minimum distance between short-term rentals if they are allowed, but a strong majority, 60%, said no, they don't feel that very strongly about there being a minimum distance between short-term rentals in the township if they are allowed. Then among those that oppose short-term rentals, that just about 40%, we asked them, what's the main reason why you would oppose it in the township in your own words? Number one, concerns about noise and lack of privacy. Followed by closely, concerns about the cohesion of the community and potential negative impacts on the neighborhood. 9% concerns about regulation and enforcement, and 8% concerns about property disrepair, trash, littering, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, 6%, they should be restricted to commercial areas only. And 30% was an assorted response of just one thing or two things that didn't combine to put anything really in a telling percentage. From there, we got into some demographic questions, and we used these not only to make sure that we were representing the community correctly, but also to, in our analysis, peel apart any different geographic or demographic subsets of the community, and if they feel differently than the community as a whole. So 17% parents of school age, parents of children 18 or younger, a pretty even split of years of residency, 27%, 10 or less, 22%, 10 to 19, 19%, 20 to 29, and the majority, 32%, having lived in the township 30 years or more. 16% of those we interviewed own or operate a business in the township. You can see 45% live north of M72 and east of Elk Lake Road. And nearly 38% live south of M72. 38% described their residence as on the shoreline or a waterway. 31% said residential, 20% said agricultural, and then just single digits for recreational. No one said commercial, by the way. Age, we have about 17% under 35, 29% 35 to 49, 41% 65 and older, and a fairly even split on gender. So what does this all mean? 2/3 of all the respondents, they report having personally used a short-term rental in the past, with the solid majority of them having a positive prior experience that I touched on earlier. 83% positive overall, 64% very positive. However, when you talk to residents that report having lived to or nearby a short-term rental, the positivity certainly drops, with 46% saying positive and an identical 46% saying negative. I thought it was important to note that 1/4 of township residents incorrectly believe that Whitewater Township currently does allow short-term rentals. And when they were informed that they are not currently allowed, a minority, 19%, said they should be allowed with no restrictions. 42% said they should be allowed with certain restrictions, and the remaining 38% said they should not be allowed under any circumstances. And as I mentioned earlier today, very little change in opinion throughout the course of the survey. Those that said no restrictions, that dropped by 2 points, from 19 down to 17. Those that said allowed with certain restrictions, that went up by 3 points, and 35% saying short-term rental should not be allowed under any circumstances, dropped a little by 3 points as well. Just to kind of sum up those battery of questions that we talked about earlier, regardless of their respective views on whether or not short-term rentals should be allowed, the main concerns are management, accountability, upkeep of rental properties, ordinance enforcement, and concerns about investment groups purchasing homes with the sole intent of creating short-term rentals as a business and limiting occupancy levels to 2 people per bedroom, with a strong majority stating that fact. As I mentioned earlier, again, the top 3 concerns mentioned about regarding allowing short-term rentals that are shared with their existing current neighbors, they were all the same 3. So, perceived potential benefits of allowing short-term rentals in the township centered around property rights of owners. That was bore out by the battery of questions, as well as the open-ended question that we asked at the end among those that do support them. Supporting local business and resident revenue, and improving the upkeep and appearance of township properties. So when you wrap this all up, nearly 6 in 10 of your residents support allowing short-term rentals in the township in some form. 4 in 10 or so with restrictions, 2 in 10 with no restrictions, and just under 4 in 10 remaining opposed to short-term rentals in any form. It's not on the screen, but I'm going to tell you, in looking at the responses and how they differ through those demographic questions that I hinted at earlier, the respondents who are more supportive than the population as a whole when it comes to allowing short-term rentals are consistently, in both asks on the question, business owners, parents, residents under the age of 50, property owners that have 2 or more acres, and those that live in agricultural areas. On the other side of the coin, those that are most opposed to allowing short-term rentals in any form, consistently being identified as your older residents, those that have been here longer, over 20 years, age 65 or older, and those that live south of M72, and specifically west of Williamsburg Road, as well as those that live on the shoreline areas. Those were the ones that were more so than the almost 4 in 10 that said we're opposed to it under any circumstances. They were the individuals that were even more opposed to it. So ultimately, and I know it's not my job to drive public policy here, I'm simply here to report on the survey results, but if the ordinance was created to allow short-term rentals, it would be advisable to look at the concerns about rules, regulations, and restrictions placed upon them and being effectually enforced by the township, with those property owners that are running short-term rentals bearing any associated cost of doing so. And with that, I'm going to take a drink of water, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Go ahead, if someone has questions.
Kelly, you mentioned 563 total responses.
Correct.
I'm assuming 100 of that was the phone calls.
Correct.
Okay. How do you rate that as far as a survey or a population in their responses? We're roughly 2,800 people. with a
Right,
Response rate of,
Well, the reason we only did 100 at first is because simply a matter of the availability of phone numbers to contact, commercially available phone numbers to contact these individuals, and the reality of how many calls it generally takes us to connect with an individual that is free and willing to do a survey. Larger areas, will often do 400, 600 samples, a reduced margin of error for that sampling. But knowing that we were going to go out and do a wider audience approach and be able to combine that 100 with also the unique individuals of quote unquote everybody in the township, we arrived at 100 as a control set that wouldn't go crazy with the township budget in order to obtain those interviews.
but if you take the number 563,
Mhm.
combined phone and online response, is 563 a good number out of 2,800?
Absolutely. We do quite frequently in our firm statewide surveys that are stratified by county when we're reporting on, say, election results or something like that. And the industry standard for that would be a 600 sample for all 11 million residents in the state of Michigan. So having nearly an identical 600 sample for the few thousand residents of the township, I thought was fantastic. I thought the response rate was great. My pleasure.
Denise, do you have anything?
Not at this time.
Andy?
Just a couple questions. The first one is you gave us the demographic profile of the township. And then did I understand you to say that you compared that then to what the demographics are for the entire township and conclude that the survey does reach an equal number of older people, younger people, and throughout the whole township?
Essentially, yes, within the margin of error, of course, because, if, for example, we reported that only 17% were under the age of 35, but the actual population is about 20%, I'm comfortable with that because it's within the margin of error of the 4-point study. It's a real difficult thing to hold when you just open it up to the entire community because we can't really say who's going to participate or certainly force somebody to participate. But what I find more important to do with that demographic information is the cross tabulation analysis, where we get into, okay, how do these specific subsets opinions differ from the entire population as a whole?
So knowing what older people feel versus younger people and being able to say that they're
Correct.
consistently in this camp versus that camp. So
Mhm,
okay.
exactly.
Okay. That's it for me right now.
As a percentage of what your survey work, how much public policy and things like what we're doing right now as a percentage of what you do, would you say you do? Is it a small percentage or is you do more election?
It varies by year. I'd say, on average, about 20% of the work we do is public policy, either related or driven, whether it's on a state level or on a municipal level. I'd say that 20% would be combined between the two.
Okay, and then with our results and seeing the percentages that you've summarized, would you, within a policy question, whatever it is, we're talking about short-term rentals, would you say that that would represent a definitive or, it's a 60-40 basically without being,
Essentially,
I'm just wondering what your thoughts are objectively being within the metrics of a results of a survey versus subjectively. The 60-40, it's obviously supportive, but it's also, I'm trying to understand with your experience, 60-40 could be very strong, even though it might not necessarily seem really strong.
right. And even looking at that question from the mathematical standpoint and going back to the margin of error of the study, it could be 60-40, could be 45-55.
Okay.
And then I would say we still did our job correctly. So that could even narrow the opinions. But because the opinions don't change from the start to finish, and they didn't change in the phone survey when we looked at that data just by itself, and they didn't change in the wider audience survey online, I'm very confident that that's a true snapshot of what your residents feel.
And within the surveys you do for these type of things, how often does the body that's getting this information follow the results of the survey versus not? Do you see it in line completely, or?
Boy, that's a
Curious.
tough one. You know, I think back to experiences, and if I take the long way around this answer, I apologize. Just tell me to shush. You know, there have been bond and millage proposals that we've surveyed, and I'll present and unfortunately say, you really don't have a chance. If you put this on the ballot, you will fail. And some take that advice and say, all right, we'll punt it down the road and we'll get our ducks in a row and try again. Some say, nah, you're wrong. And then they put it on the ballot and then they fail. From my perspective, that's a win for our company because I presented accurate data to the client. They just chose not to use it.
It's a little unique. I mean, a millage, you can find out the results after the fact, but
Right.
this is a decision we're considering, so.
And I think I do understand where you're getting at is that, you know, I'm the survey guy from Lansing. I get to go home. If changes are made in the township, you're all neighbors and that falls on you. But again, the only thing I can really rely on is the accuracy of the information I'm here to present today, which I do stand by.
That's all I had.
See,
I don't have anything.
Nothing at this time.
okay.
I have a follow-up question though. So, you've given us a snapshot of a lot of pieces of the data and the key takeaways from it, but we're able to have the raw data, correct? So that, you know, a spreadsheet or something that we can.
I could provide you with the raw data, but I would have to eliminate the verbatims. As well as the tracking numbers, because our big thing is confidentiality. And frankly, in going through, I had the pleasure of reading through all the open-ended responses through both surveys. I do the grouping myself because I know I'm going to be here talking about it. So I want to know, you know, what I'm talking about. And a lot of residents gave very potentially identifying information when talking about who their neighbor lives where or what so-and-so is doing. And, you know, further compounding that is when you get into asking questions like, where do you live? What's your race? What's your property size? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, if somebody really wanted to, they could get into that data and identify or likely identify those people. So it's a cautionary tale. If you did want the data set, I'm happy to provide it, but I would have to let you know that there's going to be certain things that, you know, just for my own professional.
Well, we would want you to strip out any identifying information. That's not the point of seeing the information. It's really, if during the work on an ordinance, we find a need to understand more what the survey was telling us, then it might be good to see what lakefront residents think versus.
Sure. If that's something you feel like you would like, I'm happy to turn it over. Yeah, absolutely. Excel spreadsheet file, okay, or, okay.
Did you, I have a question about the residential answer. You clumped residential in one category. You didn't break it out by R1, R2, R3. Is that was I understanding that correctly?
It's possible to break out the different, you know, geographic location by residency type. I didn't do it for the presentation because sometimes when you get in there, the sample sizes of those are so small that from a statistical perspective, rather, the margin of error just becomes so large that I hesitate to point to those things and say, this is reliable.
But the question said residential shoreline and then residential subdivision.
Or subdivision,
Yeah,
correct.
subdivision, yeah. And I was thinking, it didn't say R1 or R2.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think then we have to get into educating people in terms of whether they're R1 or R2, and we didn't have the opportunity to do that before the survey, so.
Interestingly, only a single digit percentage of residents could not describe their residence after we went through the different type of zoning designations in the township.
Okay. Anything else for Kelly?
Yes, can you comment on the households that had multiple registered voters or adults? Um, were most of those households submitting more than one survey, or
We
how did
had
you read
very
that?
limited attempts at what I call stuffing the ballot box on the particular survey. When the entire data set was combined between the phone and online, there were over 600 entries in there. And through culling some of those duplicates, and the majority of the ones that were duplicates were simply false starts. I mean, we get date, time, and everything in the data set, and I could see someone would put their code in, answer the first couple of questions, and then a few minutes later, here comes that same code. The first couple of questions are the same, and then the survey is completed. So whether it was a technology thing or the dog was barking or whatever, they ended up having to come back and restart. So the majority of the responses that we removed were simply false starts. I would say less than a dozen that were, and not even glaringly, but in my opinion, could be construed as attempting to take the survey more times than there were individuals assigned to that code.
Hey. If it's all right with, because I know you've got a long drive, but if it's all right with everybody, what I'd like to do is, we have no correspondence, and I'll go through the rest of this, but I'd like to open up to public comment, so that we can get some feedback from the public on the survey results. And while the public won't be able to direct questions directly to Kelly, the PC will be having a discussion after public comment, and we can certainly ask those questions then. Okay, does that sound like a good plan? Okay, all right, thanks, Kelly.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we've received no correspondence. Our next meeting is at 7 o'clock, September 9th, here. And please note, this is not the first Wednesday of the month, and this meeting was scheduled back in January when we made our yearly schedule. So we will open up to public comment. The same rules apply, and Scott will be timing you. Joe, can we move the TV now?
If you're all done with it, yeah.
I think so.
All done. Yeah, we should.
Or just, yeah, do you want to just set it on the floor? That's great. Okay, would anybody like to make a public comment?
John Fitzgerald, 8649 Church Street. I'm a STR owner. I live in the property most of the year, but rent it out in the summer for the horse show. I was actually very pleased with the survey results. I was very dubious of the telephone survey. I just want to say I'm happy that the online responses and the telephone responses were combined and seemed to be, in my mind, at least reflective of the sentiments of the community. I just want to point out, anecdotally at least, I didn't receive a postcard. I know other people who are also short-term rental owners didn't receive postcards. We had to request one from Kelly. So I just want to point that out, that I'm hoping that that wasn't done in a malicious or malevolent way, but I didn't receive a postcard. So I'm just wondering how, if you can answer it or if Kelly can address it, I'm just wondering how a mail survey could go out to the township and certain residents not receive it. But I will say, very happy with the survey results as they're presented today. So
Thank you. Anyone else?
What times are September 9th? 7?
Mike Jacobson, Whitewater resident. The information presented here today is very, very, very similar to the information we collected when we were doing the master plan. it almost to the number, the same numbers. I think that should be something you should weigh heavily on you. The community was then and is now in favor of this entity being in our community. The overwhelming results are that we would like to see some restrictions. I thought they did a good job on asking what kind of restrictions, and I think they got good answers. Also, I'm very happy to hear Mr. Kelly's response when asked how confident he is about his information. He seems very confident and he's willing to point out why. I think that's very important. It's a good reason not to doubt it. He's giving you accurate information as he said. So I hope that this helps you get this this program going in a fashion that will solve the problem for all the residents of the community, not just the short-term rental people, but the people who live next to the problem short-term rentals. They deserve just as much relief from this as the people who are being denied the income from it. So please do your best to do that, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Kim Angus, Whitewater Township resident. I'm sure you guys are going to take some time and dig through these, as are any of us that are concerned with this topic. But I wanted to bring a couple things and just highlight it. The real support should be no surprise to anybody. Younger families and business owners. Those are the people who need this to survive. The major opposition, waterfront and older residents. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone on either count. Additionally, we've spent enough time. We've gone over this. We've examined it. It's really time to move ahead and get an ordinance put together. You've had an ordinance that you could consider that could have been altered, still could be altered. We need to move ahead and get this on the books. In 50 years of zoning, if this was illegal, I don't accept the interpretation that it's legal. You all know that. We have never, until now, had so much as a violation letter or a note of concern. And we all know that this has gone on in our township for all of those 50 years. So I'd encourage this group to move forward and get something on the books so that the folks that are doing short-term rentals can continue. And so that, like Mike said, the concerns of people with property near a short-term rental have some additional support. The second major thing I wanted to point out is when you look back over the data, I think what you'll find is that the vast majority of the biggest concerns are all addressed by general ordinance. If we were enforcing noise, parking, those type of nuisance ordinances with the general ordinances or improved copies thereof, that will take care of a vast majority of the greatest, largest concerns that people shared. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll move on to PC discussion. And the first thing I want to do is ask Kelly to go ahead and explain how the postcards were, how you decided where the postcards were going and the timing and all that.
Sure. So a combination of what I'm going to call the tax rolls from the township. Some of them, were, as you know, delivered to folks' primary residents that were not in the township. We had some going to Tennessee and all across the state, et cetera, et cetera. I personally wish I could control the delivery response rate of the United States Postal Service. Unfortunately, I cannot. So I can't speak to what happened to any postcards that were not received by residences. We tried to make them literally paper size. They were not just tiny little postcards so that they didn't get lost in the mail or stuck in with a flyer or a community pamphlet or whatnot. But unfortunately, that does sometimes happen. What I find interesting is that when we do projects like this, and this is certainly not our first rodeo with this approach, normally within the first week or so, we'll get some back as undeliverable. And to date, I have not received more than 20 postcards returned to our office as undeliverable. So I can't speak to what happened to those postcards that were not received, unfortunately. I do know that we did our level best using the information that we had and our in-house databases to make sure that everybody was included in the wider audience research with the online survey. But unfortunately, that didn't hit everybody. I did try to make myself as available as possible for any follow-up inquiries, whether it was via email, telephone, and hopefully you hear good things about that response rate from me to residents in the township. But I could see where, it would be frustrating to know that, well, my neighbors got one and I didn't get one. Why not? It was not any type of selection criteria. It simply got, for lack of a better term, lost in the mail.
And were they all sent on the same day?
They were all sent on the same day. Yep. So what happens is we print the appropriate number and they get sequenced with their unique user ID code. They get postmarked and paid, and then they get delivered to pre-sort all on the same day at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
Pleasure.
Okay, so PC discussion. Let's talk about our next steps. And also if we have any further questions for Kelly that come up, feel free. So in general, are we feeling like between the January workshop, survey, the public feedback that we received, do we have enough to begin, or do we need to do a second workshop before we begin writing the ordinance, or we can hold the second workshop after we've got it first draft to get some feedback? That's kind of what I'd like to hear.
Can you do a sort of a high level overview of the January workshop? Because I wasn't part of that, and Mike kind of touched on it when he talked about it. I'd just like to know, like, how long was it, and what was the community's how did they just, was it just a dialogue, or was there actual things that were written down, or how did that work?
So we have, and I can get you a copy of it if you don't have one already. So it was run by the Michigan State University Extension, and they sent over their land use expert and then their workshop expert, for lack of a better term. And we had I think it ran about 2 hours. It was held at the school, and people were in groups, and there was an introduction that was given by the land use expert. And then the groups were asked to respond to 4 questions? Do you guys remember?
Yeah, I think so, 4 or 5.
And they had Post-its. And so they would go up and put
I
their
saw the
Post-it
board
up.
after the fact.
Yeah,
Okay. Yep.
yeah. And then MSU wrote a report based on those responses. And one of the things that was, there were 2 main things that came out of that. One was it was held in January, so we had a lot of people who couldn't attend. We did try to do a Zoom component, but it was, the issue with the Zoom component, I think, was that people were uncomfortable writing in their comments because they were identified, via the meeting. So we got some feedback from that, but not all. So there was, an issue about the snowbirds basically, weren't here for the workshop. And then the second thing was that property rights were a huge issue.
Yep.
So, and then there's further detail in the report. I'll get that sent out to you.
Okay.
So what do you think? Next steps?
I just have a thought, I guess, before we get to that. It's just the drawing a distinction between this survey information and what was done with the master plan. The master plan survey was done in 2023, and there was a survey sent out to residents, and it covered a lot of planning and development issues in the township. There was one question asked about short-term rentals at that point. It was just, do you favor them? And there were a couple of just choices. So we had one question that was raised to that, and the survey response was about the same. I think we had a little more from the community survey from the master plan, but in any event, but what we have now, thanks to the work from Epic, MRA and Kelly, that we have a more complete picture of what people want and don't want and what their concerns are. And that really gives us a stronger foundation to write an ordinance from. I think before it was kind of the shorthand statement was it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 don't want it, 1/3 want it, and 1/3 aren't sure or something. I forget. But anyway, now we have a much more complete picture, and I feel a lot more comfortable working on an ordinance. I've heard people come to the planning commission and say, everyone wants short-term rentals or no one wants it, and everyone's convinced that they represent the whole township. But now we have some empirical data that tells us exactly what people think, and we spent 2 or 3, 4 meetings, I don't know what it was, but several meetings working on the question. So we should have the essential elements to build an ordinance in my mind. And I guess going on to your question, in my mind, it makes sense to move forward with an ordinance development and then perhaps have a workshop when there's something that is a draft ordinance that we want feedback on. But that's just my thought.
And our goal with the survey was to get us more information in terms of being able to write the ordinance,
Right.
which definitely shaped the question so that we would know based on those percentages whether we were going to need to write an ordinance or not, and then what that might look like.
And then we also build on the work of the ROWG and all the time that they spent accumulating sample ordinances.
It's the other piece of the pie that I left out. So we've got the workshop, we've got the research from the resident outreach work group, which includes a spreadsheet looking at other Michigan townships. It also includes white papers on legal review of short-term rentals or legal decisions that have been made based on short-term rental, whether they're allowed or not, which is similar to the court ruling on the case that the township currently has, which supports what we've been saying, which is that our current ordinance does not allow them. And so we've got white papers, we've got that large spreadsheet on the surrounding townships, as well as the workshop and now the survey information. So in my mind, I think we have enough to go ahead and draft an ordinance. I know there's going to be sticking points even, amongst ourselves. So I think it's the input from the PC as well as the public is going to be very important. And so I'm leaning towards a workshop that would be held after we have that draft ordinance. I was hoping that we would be able to do it before people leave for the winter, but I don't know that that's going to happen. It'll kind of depend on how quickly we draft something.
When you refer to a workshop, you're referring to what was done in January after the fact, or?
We had talked about doing a second workshop.
Okay.
And so we've got the information from the first workshop. The second workshop would be community input again, in person. What I'm proposing and what Randy's talking about as well would be getting feedback based on that draft proposal.
And I think I see it a little different. Why wouldn't we just use the same process that we're using with our consultant for the citeries and have dialogue, have language, have a special meeting where you have public response? Because I think a workshop's been done. I think you've done a survey, and I might be wrong, but I would think that process is working really well with cideries and winery. And that's what I would suggest we do, and just get into the ordinance, get into the language and see how it evolves openly, and have a packet, right? And work through the packet and then have a public hearing on it.
And we have requested a sample short-term rental ordinance from the attorney.
Yeah.
Which would probably be the place we would start before we'd use the consultant. So so we've got that to kind of look at to get us started for sure. And then I agree, input from the consultant would definitely be helpful.
I think that's been really constructive, and we've been doing pretty good lately with that, I think. So that would be I would say that another workshop, I don't think you would need it. I think the public has given their input, especially considering we have a survey in hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that. I think that if we keep going down if like how we've been working on other things, that it will be more productive, I think. I feel like we've asked the public, we've done the survey, we've done multiple different things. The ROWG was open to the public to come and listen, and then obviously all of our meetings, so if we're discussing it, there's public comment twice in each meeting. They can weigh in, they can see where we're at. It's very, you read the packet, this is where we're at, this is what we're looking at, this is our draft. It's available at all times to anybody that wants to read it. I just think it's just, I feel like another like event like we had is like, just feels like a pause. It takes a lot of time. It costs money. And we've already spent a lot of money on this as it is. So if we can keep moving forward and keep the public informed through posting our packet online, and they can come and weigh in on where we're at, and I think that's the best path.
Rod?
I don't agree with that logic. I believe that a workshop is an appropriate action. We've walked through several exercises here. We've used the ROWG to collect data. I think it's important to share that data with the public. And I think a workshop is a very appropriate mechanism to take the information we have. We haven't had a chance to read it yet. I want to spend time looking at it, shaping some opinions here, obviously, and I think everybody else, and working with our vendor to begin the process makes a lot of sense. But I would definitely be against locking out a workshop or not having a workshop. I think that's very fundamental in what we've been trying to do to be open and sharing information with the public.
I hear you on that one, but my viewpoint would be to move forward. I think we should just move forward with it. With the community has spoke. We did the first workshop and we got a lot of information from that workshop. And I think that survey, with Kelly's confidence behind the survey, is enough to move forward.
Yeah. I agreed that I think we should go ahead and start writing a proposed ordinance. And Rachel Stillman did her ordinance request, and she filed it in April of 25. The case was assigned a number June 4th of 2025, and the hearing was August 26th of 2025. We've spent a long time on this ordinance. I'd like to get started writing it. And then after we work through this, along with all the public comments that will be coming our way on what we have decided, and then maybe have a workshop or an open house or a special meeting for people to come in and tell us what they think of what we have proposed. But I just would, it's been so long on this that I think we need to start moving forward on it. And do we, as a planning commission, forward our recommendation to the township board because it's a general ordinance?
Yeah, Randy helped me with this. So my understanding is that the zoning ordinance is just going to state whether it's an allowed or special use type of situation, and if it's what districts that use would be allowed in. The majority of the ordinance will be in the general ordinance or police ordinance, and that's what rules and activities. So, if there's a license requirement, quiet hours, how many people per bedroom, that type of thing. If there's a minimum stay or a maximum stay, that kind of thing would all be in the general ordinance. Is that correct?
Yeah, there might be a blend of changes to the zoning ordinance as well as a general ordinance that comes out of the process here. I
And
guess,
do we need direction from the town board to work on the general ordinance? Because it's not typically something that we amend, right?
typically not, right? But I think we have that direction from the town board to proceed with that. I guess on the issue of the workshop, I would just say that the workshop could take many forms. It doesn't have to be the same kind of workshop we had before. It could be, I'm thinking back to when we worked on the COPUD district and we had that special meeting beforehand just to get some feedback. The problem with a public hearing that you have with a zoning amendment is very structured. Everybody comes up with their comments and it's less of a interactive kind of discussion. So maybe that workshop term implies something like we had at Mill Creek, and it need not be that. It could be something else that precedes the formal public hearing as a way of getting additional input if we need that. I mean, I guess I don't know. I'm all in favor of trying to get this ordinance work done and
I think
and
that would be
move forward.
constructive, and that's what I envisioned, is having something to open this, but not necessarily a formal
Yeah, the
workshop.
public hearing is all, I mean, it's required by law. You've got to do it. There's notices and, it's a little bit more.
And our COPUD open hearing was very constructive.
Yeah,
It
it was.
really
yeah.
changed, it turned everything on its heel.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like that still felt like we're making, I'm on board with that. As we move along, like, okay, we think we're ready to, like, maybe we need to have a meeting like that, then we can decide that as we get
Yeah,
there, but
if there's a need to have
yeah.
a open house or whatever, you
Mhm.
want just to have people come and ask questions about what's
Yeah.
being developed. Sometimes material gets out there in the community and it's not always accurate and we have to fight against that.
Okay, so Kelly's presentation will be available on the township website. It'll be under the planning commission agenda packets area. So the public will have access to it as well as all of us. And then there's an executive report. What other reports are there?
We have the top lines. Forgot about the microphone. We have the top line results in the form of a frequency report that kind of goes through every single question and what the percentages were for each. We have what you called a data dump, which is the cross tabulation. That is every single question by every other demographic and geographic question and how the difference in responses are for each one. Up to you if you want that shared. It can be real easy to get into the weeds, not knowing that with reduced numbers of sample sizes, we only had X amount of individuals that fit this criteria. Does that have the same margin of error as the study as a whole? No, it does not. So sometimes municipalities do not put that open to the public just because it's really easy to get bogged down with the nuances of the numbers if you're not used to reading them and knowing what they really mean. And then, yes, the full written report with the executive summary and takeaways. I don't want to call them recommendations because, again, we're here to help inform public policy, but I can't make the decisions on that myself. So that is up to you to share if you'd like.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And then the ROWG work has been available. I don't know if the notebook is still up there, but I'll make sure that everybody has an electronic copy of that as well on the PC. Were you gonna say something? No?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm just thinking back here and I feel so much more confident now with the data that we have. For example, just the one piece about the residents feel strongly about the fact that the operators of short-term rentals should bear the cost of the administration of any regulations. I mean, we didn't know that before.
Mhm.
In the prior draft of an ordinance, it was $100 for 5 year per permit, which wouldn't come anywhere near the cost of administering this. So anyway, I think we have a lot better guidance here from the residents, and that's what we wanted, and that's what we should run with.
Okay.
I would also like to say that I think as we get into the ordinance and consider language, that the language is very important. But one of the things the survey showed, and that was voiced by the public, is accountability, regulation, the governance of the language, and how that relates to the township board with the general ordinance and how that's working with this ordinance, that might be in a big, it's gonna be important to me. Cause there's parallels to this and like when we're talking about language for cideries and special use. Well, if you don't treat it like a special use process, the language doesn't matter. And with this, the enforcement, the licensing, the governance of this language is almost as important as the language, maybe even more important than the language itself, whatever that language becomes. So for me, it's going to be a parallel path, and I'm always going to be asking the question, okay, if this is what we're going to support in language, how is it going to be governed?
Right. Can it be
It's
enforced?
got, everything has to be asked that way. And one of the points you made is how's it gonna be paid for? It should be funded correctly. So that might mean these licenses are not cheap.
Right.
I don't know, but that's going to be an important parallel to the language itself. And I think that's how this can be successfully written and enforced.
Yep. Anything else?
Can you give me some, how we're going to proceed, steps that you have, that you're thinking that we should do? Does it need to go to the township board for them to send back to us that they want us to write an ordinance, or can we just proceed, or how do you think that works?
I think we've been given that direction.
We have, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which town board meeting it was. I think it was shortly after the workshop.
Okay.
But I'll double check on that. And then, the short-term rental, ordinance that the, attorney worked on, I'll get that out to everybody. And we'll probably use that as a starting point and the ROWG information and the survey information, which is so useful, and start shaping that for Whitewater Township.
At the next meeting? Okay.
So that'll, I don't know if I want to put all that ROWG stuff in our packets. It's a lot. We'll probably post that separately so you can access it. Mhm. Yeah, so I would say at the next meeting, we'll start discussing the, based on what we've got, the ordinance, what the ordinance might start looking like. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I know we have a plan to start a new bundle next month. Do we want to push that back a month?
Yeah.
That's
I just
a
don't,
good topic.
or make special meetings to,
Yeah, because we were gonna try and separate that. Remember back how we first started with them, where we did our bundles separate from our normal meetings, because it was like
yeah.
so long. And that was more productive. Stinks to have that extra day though, but
Well, we'll talk to Andy about that and I'll check with you about some dates for a special meeting. And also I need to refresh my memory on what's in the next bundle. I don't recall what it is. I think the first bundle that we did was probably the most involved, I hope. And so the next one should.
Yeah,
be
I think
easier
it's going to
get
get a little bit easier in terms
if I
of
remember the schedules, that's how we did it, but
the harder stuff came first in terms
Mhm.
of talking about PUDs and site plans and stuff that I know is.
what's on the agenda for the next meeting?
I believe there might be a site plan review for AIS.
Oh,
I don't know if that's gonna be September or October. I don't know if they've gotten the information to Deb yet. But no public hearing yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right, let me talk to Andy about that and, cause I would like to kind of strike while the iron's hot here while we've got this information. Okay. Anything else we want to discuss?
Is the boilerplate by the attorney, is that available right now? Right? You can get it quickly?
Yeah, he gave me a link,
Okay.
so I will send you
You
the
can
link.
share that? Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. And some of it applies and some of it doesn't, of course,
Yep.
because it was written for a specific township. Okay, so I will send the link out, make sure that nobody is doing reply all on any of this, because of the Open Meetings Act. And our discussions will only take place at our at the meetings here. Okay. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second,
Second merchant.
all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right.
and
Thank you very much.